Welcome to In His Voice on a new network. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and I thank you for joining me today for this conversation with inspiring Black men. You know, we often hear about what men do for a living, but on this show, we focus on what they do to create a meaningful life.
Come on and listen to his story in his voice.
My guest today is Reggie Cunningham, also known as KidNoble. He captures the beauty of Black people through his lens as a professional photographer and creator of the brand Pure Black. His work includes stunning portraits of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, voting rights activist Stacey Abrams, and striking images from the Black Lives Matter movement. His work has also been featured on the cover of British Vogue, where he photographed his wife, activist and political commentator, Brittany Packnett Cunningham. He's a proud native of St. Louis, Missouri, and currently resides in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Reggie.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. I am thrilled to be here joining you with this.
Yes, we're so glad to have you. And you know what? I wanted to ask you, tell us about the name KidNoble. Where did it come from and what does it mean?
Oh, man. It comes from the fact that back in the Facebook days, when social media really started becoming a thing, I started hearing about how people needed to really protect their social presence because, you know, jobs would do research and find you on Facebook and not hire you because of whatever. And so I changed my name on Facebook to Reggie Noble. And then when Twitter became a thing, I needed a moniker to go off of, and I didn't want to use Reggie Noble. And I had a professional athlete at the time that was a friend of mine who would just call me Kid all the time. So I just threw the kid in front of the noble, and you know, the rest is history, as they say.
There it is. And obviously your work is noble, it is exquisite for everyone. We encourage you to check out Reggie's Instagram page and his website to see his work. Reggie, what projects are you currently working on?
I actually just shot a personal project of mine that I have been ideating for like the past couple months in Rock Creek Park. So I haven't quite gotten to editing those yet, but I have photographed them, and I am super excited to figure out what I want to do with those when I put them out into the world, whether I want that to be part of a like longer photo series or whether I want it to just stand on its own. But it is something I'm super excited about adding to my portfolio.
Well, Reggie, tell us, how do you define success?
You know, it's interesting because how I've defined success as I have grown older, as my career has progressed, has definitely changed, right? Before it was, you know, I will be successful when I have a billboard in Times Square, right? Which is still a goal, but that's not how I'm defining my success anymore. Or I'll be successful when I am, you know, shooting whoever, or when I don't have to advertise that I'm a photographer. I think now I'm defining success as walking in my purpose, right? I think my purpose right now is to tell visually Black stories. And it doesn't matter whether that's in a magazine or whether that's on a billboard or on television or whatever. The purpose is telling the story. And as long as I am doing that, I feel like I am successful.
Nice.
So, walking in your purpose, man, like whatever that purpose is in life, as long as you are operating within that and within your values, then that is, you are being successful.
Reggie, who are you inspired by?
Oh man, I am inspired by so many people. I am constantly and always inspired by my wife. I watch how hard she works, how hard she fights for our people on a daily basis in a myriad of different lanes, whether that be, you know, making a speech somewhere or her working on her book, talking on TV, any of those lanes. I'm always inspired by the work that she does. I'm inspired by my father and the relationship that we've been able to build over the last 20 years or so. At one point, that wasn't always what I thought was possible. And he has gotten his life together to the point where he has his PhD, he has his own therapy practice, and is super successful. He speaks around the country. So I'm always inspired by his journey. I think every Black boy out here is inspired by their mom. So like that's, that needless to say, that's a given. But then I'm also inspired by some of my contemporaries, like Joshua Kissy, who is a photographer based in New York, or Mark Clennon, another photographer based in New York. We are always pushing each other to be better and to, push the boundaries of storytelling and telling Black stories out into the world.
I love it. I love it. And, I wanted to ask, because I'm sure a lot of people wonder, how did you get into photography? Or is it that photography got into you?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I actually think photography was always in me, and I didn't find it until I was a certain age, right? I grew up around photography. My mom, as a single mom, that was her side gig to help support the family when I was growing up. From the time I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, on weekends, I knew mom was going to go shoot a wedding, right? That's just kind of what she did, or she was shooting school pictures during the week, right? I grew up with all of the family's photo albums on my bookshelf for my entire family. My mom has 11 brothers and sisters, and we had the photo albums, right? And my mom even had photo albums for my dad's side of the family. I grew up with photo books and Essence and Ebony and Jet on my coffee table, right? And having to move them out the way when I get the dusting on Saturday mornings while listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? So I grew up around visual art all the time. I mean, my mom would even take art that had white people in it. She would take it out of the frame, go get my color pencils and color them Black, and then put them back in the frame and back on the wall. So that's what I grew up around. And I never thought I would be a photographer, though. I went to school for journalism. I always, I shot photos for my school paper, but I didn't see that as a career for me. I was going to go be a columnist somewhere or work in PR in the NFL, which I did for about 8 seasons. I moved to DC, and by that time when Ferguson happened, I had, kind of took my mom's camera, started, documenting some of the stories that were going on there for myself. I just felt like it was something that needed to be created. When I relocated to DC in 2016, I knew that I wasn't going to move here and get a job right away. The likelihood of that was low. And so I asked my mom, could I take her camera and use that as a means of supplementing my income until I found the kind of job that I wanted. And, I was like, I'm about to move to DC. I'm going to get me a PR job, making 6 figures and be out here balling and we good. And that is absolutely not what happened in the slightest. It took me over a year to find my first job after I moved here. And during that time, I started doing photography. I never called myself a photographer. I always called myself someone who takes pictures, right? And I finally found a job in a nonprofit sector. I worked that for about 7 or 8 months and then got laid off. And this was hard for me because at the time, my then girlfriend, I was ready to propose to. We'd been together for a couple of years. I was saving up money. I had the money saved up. Right when I got enough money, that's when I got laid off. And, she sat me down and she said, maybe you're not finding what you're looking for because you're supposed to be a photographer. Like that is what's in your heart. And essentially gave me permission to go chase that. Right. So that day I said a prayer. I said, God, if we're going to do this, it's got to pop. Right. I need this to jump because I'm trying to propose. I'm trying to get married, trying to get my life started. And that day I got contacted by Teach for America. I got contacted by Planned Parenthood and about 3 other people for just solo portrait sessions. And I was like, okay, cool. We're going to do it, And the rest, they say, is history. I've been doing it full time since that was in August of 2018. And so I've been doing it full time since then. The blessings came down. I was able to propose and get married. And, now we are here.
I love it. I love it. And there's also another common thread that I love, and it's the support of Black women in your life, always. From your mother to those who encourage you to pursue photography as your profession, to your wife, Brittany, who is such a dynamic and inspirational voice, literally like the voice of our generation, helping to move this country forward, right, and fight for Black people. And I think I love that that's a common thread in your life. And wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on protecting and nurturing and encouraging Black women in particular, and then the Black community as a whole?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Black women, that's nurturing and protecting them is a necessity. I think it is written into my DNA to do that. I remember one time, me and Brittany used to attend this small church when we first moved here, and the assistant pastor prophesied over us one day. And she told me that, and this is literally the day that first time we ever attended this church. We literally just walked in and we're looking for our seat. And she was like, come here. I feel something, a message for you. And she called us up there and she told me that day that I was a protector. And that is part of my assignment and part of my role. So I take that very seriously. I'd be the first to admit I don't always get it perfect, because of, socialization and patriarchy. There are still things that I am unlearning and learning to be better. But I am always on that journey of trying to be better and encouraging those around me to be better as well. I want to get to the point where Black women can sit back and rest. Black women are out here constantly saving the world, right? We look at this last election and all the work that a lot of the Black women around the country were doing to flip Georgia blue, right? And a lot of the other, smaller elections like Tashara Jones, who just won as the first Black mayor of my hometown in St. Louis, right? Yes. Like there were Black women behind her that got her elected. And back in the previous election, she got screwed out of being mayor. She only lost by 888 votes because there were other Black men in the race who would not drop out, who knew they had no chance of winning. Wow. So yeah, I want to get to the point where like Black women are able to just sit back and rest and like, let us do some of the work, right? But we have to get to the point where we're willing to pick up and do that work. And so I really take the role seriously of protector, of informer, and trying to get my other fellow Black men out here to step it up. And I think that in promoting the welfare of Black women, we end up promoting the welfare of all Black people, right? Because if we're picking up the reins of the work that they're doing and they're out here fighting for everybody, then we are all then fighting for everybody. So yeah, when Black women are succeeding, we're all succeeding. And that's how I look at it.
You're right about that. When Black women succeed, we all succeed. Thank you for sharing that, Reggie. I appreciate that. And you mentioned kind of the spiritual background where someone prophesied over you. And that's what we kind of wanted to explore as a part of this show as well. Do you have any spiritual or wellness practices that keep you grounded?
Prayer is first and foremost, right? Like, my Christian walk has definitely been a journey as well. I used to be a lot more, I've always been a believer, right? But I used to really struggle with faith, and that is very hard when you operate within a faith-based religion, right? It was very hard for me to just trust and believe that something would happen when I prayed for it, right? Or that waiting on God to do what God was going to do. So I've gotten to the point where every night me and Brittany are reading the Bible. I have grown to the point where whenever we meet anything that is a struggle, one of the first things I do is like, hey, let's get to praying, right? Like we need to go ahead, take this to God. If it's a problem, then we need to just leave it at the altar. And if it's a celebration, then we're going to praise. And even if it's a problem, we're going to praise in advance, right? We go to church. Well, we attend virtual church right now, but in general, we go to church every week. We actually, we're very intentional about finding a church home when we moved here that not only fostered our growth, but was also LGBTQIA friendly. And justice oriented, who believed in a Jesus who was for all people. and not a punitive Jesus, right? But one who was always for our welfare. And so it took us about a year and some change to find our church home when we moved here. But we love our church. And we are tuned in. And oftentimes we will tune in to church on Sunday, and then we'll cut on. Sometimes we listen to Stephen Furtick too, right? And watch his podcast. And so we'll attend our church, which is Mount Enon here in Clinton, Maryland. And then we'll turn that off and tune in to Stephen Furtick and see what he got to say about Jesus on Sunday. So yeah, we are heavy in prayer. I am thankful to God that I have a praying mother-in-law. I married a God-fearing woman, and God knew what he was doing when he put Brittany in my life.
I love it. I love it. Just honestly, to hear you speak so highly of your queen.
That's my boo, you know?
Yes, I love it. I love it. And I want Black people to see this. I want Black men to see this, Black women to see it. And not that other people don't speak highly of their queens, but to have a platform like this where we can share more of these stories where Black men are uplifting Black women is really what we want to do.
Yeah.
Well, Reggie, you mentioned taking photos in Ferguson. You obviously have some striking images on your page from the Black Lives Matter movement from the summer of 2020. We all know DC was just hot. Social justice was just, Black people were enraged.
Yes,
we were at such a turning point in our society after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And you were on the ground months on end capturing these images. And I can only imagine what that must have done and what kind of toll it may have taken on your emotional and mental health. And really just wanted to ask you about that. How do you take care of your mental health?
It's interesting because I think because of my journalistic background, in the moment, I am able to often detach myself from what's going on. One thing you'll often hear photographers that shoot protests and stuff talk about is the fact that sometimes having that camera in front of your face kind of distances you from what's actually happening, right? And then sometimes when I go back and look at the footage, or like I get home and I turn on the news, or just look at the photos that I took, and I'm like, wow, like this was way more intense than I thought it was, or this could have really went left very quickly. It is surprising. I think the other way that I end up taking care of myself with that stuff is I don't just shoot traumatic stuff that's happening at protests, right? Because that's all that like the news does. The news is going to see, you're going to see the police spraying the tear gas and spraying the pepper spray and arresting people and all that. So like, I don't necessarily feel it's my duty to always show that, right? One of my favorite protests that I shot last summer was on Juneteenth, where the protest marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, stopped at Freedom Plaza, and there was a go-go band on the back of a truck, and people was out there dancing and singing and having a good time and celebrating being Black, and celebrating the day that we all were finally free after the Civil War, right? So like, to me, those are protests too, because joy is a part of that. Right? Like being able to freely exhibit joy and be carefree in those moments is a protest. And so I feel like those things are important to capture too, to be able to show the world that the fullness of the Black experience, right? It's not just people holding a sign and yelling and getting beaten and sprayed with tear gas and all of that, but it's dancing in the middle of the street. It's, Black girls turning double dutch on Black Lives Matter Plaza, right? It's holding up a fist in front of the White House. It's all of these different things that aren't necessarily always traumatic. The other thing is both, my wife and I have a really great therapist. And when we need to talk those things out with a therapist, that's exactly what we do, right? She is absolutely wonderful. She has definitely helped in my own personal growth in a lot of different areas. And I do a lot of talking to my wife as well, right? She, because of the work that she does, more than understands oftentimes what I am feeling. I pick and choose when to engage. One of the things I learned from Ferguson is, you know, the police kill a lot of Black people, right? And I can't submerge myself in each story. There's plenty of other photographers out there that be at protests, that tell stories, and the picture's going to get taken. And may I have FOMO of, you know, when I see a photo and I'm like, dang, that's fire, I should have took that. Sure, right? But for my personal health, sometimes I can't engage in those things. And that has to be okay for all Black people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like the fact that essentially you're giving yourself permission to set boundaries and to take breaks.
Exactly.
To preserve your mental health. I like that. I like that. Well, Reggie, I've enjoyed chatting with you. As we wrap up, the last thing I want to know, and what I think our audience would love to know also, is what do you hope your legacy will be?
Wow. You know, it's interesting because that reminds me of a question that Brittany often asks people, which is, what do you want to be true in the world because you were here, right? So I want my legacy to be, and I want to be true, that people look at Black folks with affinity and love and all of the accolade and everything that they deserve. And if I can create a visual story in my life that makes people do that, then I feel like that is the legacy that I was put here to create. And when I say that, I mean like Blackness in its fullness. So like not just, you know, the Black person, the model Black person who is standing there in a suit and tie and clean cut and all of those things. Like, I also want everyone to look at that Black girl who took the toothbrush that morning and did her edges and all the swirls and has the gold teeth and the long nails and the colored hair and the color like, I want people to look at those Black folks with the same affinity as the way they look at the model minority as well, right? So if I am inspiring people to do that with my lens and what I choose to put out into the world, then I feel like I've succeeded in leaving a powerful legacy that my kids and my kids' kids and my ancestors can be proud of.
Awesome. Well, Reggie, please know we are incredibly proud of you. Thank you for being here today. And thanks to everybody tuning in to this edition of In His Voice with our visual storyteller, Reggie Cunningham. Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you for having me.